Apologize or leave. Those were the exact words the CEO, Mr. Beaumont, said while staring at me across the polished glass conference table. His son, Ethan, lounged in a chair beside him like a bored prince waiting for someone to kneel. My hands were folded calmly in front of me. My heart wasn't calm, but I refused to let either of them see it. And all I said was, "All right." Ethan smirked like a child who'd finally gotten his favorite toy taken away from another kid. Mr. Beaumont blinked, surprised I didn't argue. He expected negotiation. Or begging. I gave him neither. He cleared his throat as if regaining control. "Since you understand, consider this your final warning. You will apologize to Ethan for failing to follow through." "I didn't fail to follow through." I cut in, voice steady. "I refuse to approve an unbudgeted vendor contract without proper documentation. That's policy, not disrespect." His jaw tightened. Ethan leaned forward. "See? She's doing it again. She thinks she knows more than me." I didn't respond. Arguing with someone who confused ego with competence was pointless. Mr. Beaumont locked his gaze on me again. 2-week suspension, without pay. You'll return once you've apologized and recommitted to proper professional conduct. There was a moment, one sharp still second, where everyone waited for my reaction. I nodded once. Understood. That wasn't the reaction they were prepared for. Ethan straightened, his smirk fading just enough to betray confusion. Mr. Beaumont looked almost disappointed, like a man robbed of the dramatic power struggle he rehearsed. "Is there anything else?" I asked. He waved his hand. "We expect you back on the 16th. I stood, gathered my notes, and walked out. Not fast, not flustered. Controlled, silent. But every step felt like shedding weights I had carried far too long. My office had been my second home for 4 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. My walls held framed certifications, awards, and thank you cards from project teams I had led through chaos and impossible timelines. This wasn't just a job. I had built entire departments, systems, procedures, things that kept the company running smoothly while others collected credit. Ethan wasn't one of those others. He collected power, and his father handed it to him wrapped in gold. 3 days earlier, Ethan had demanded I approve a vendor invoice triple the agreed amount. No documentation, no justification, no discussion. Just do it. When I asked for a breakdown and contract versioning, he stormed out and filed a complaint claiming I was blocking innovation. I didn't think he'd take it this far. But deep down, maybe I always knew something like this was coming. People like Ethan don't hate competence. They fear it. And fear makes them dangerous. I packed slowly. Not because I needed time, but because I wanted clarity. Every award I pulled down reminded me of working 70-hour weeks while Ethan posted rooftop cocktails on social media. Every manual, every blueprint, every signed-off approval reminded me I wasn't lucky. I was necessary. My email pinged. James, lead project manager. "What happened?" "Ethan's telling people you're suspended." Maya, senior analyst. "Please tell me there's a misunderstanding." Alex, compliance. "Do you need support? I'll testify if necessary." My throat tightened. Not with sadness, but with recognition. People had noticed. People cared. Not about drama, about integrity. I silenced my phone and kept packing. My resignation letter took 12 minutes to finalize. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because it needed precision. No emotion, no accusation, just truth. A clock ticked somewhere in the office, the first time I'd ever actually heard it. Time felt louder when you knew you were done pretending. I saved the file, printed it, signed it. Then I paused. My hand hovered over the send button of an email that contained project documentation, financial inconsistencies, timeline impact reports, and audit-ready summaries of every violation Ethan had pushed for. Facts, no insults, no opinions, just receipts. Click, sent. The next morning, I arrived early. Too early for witnesses. I placed the resignation letter neatly on my empty desk, locked my office door behind me, turned in my badge, and walked toward the elevator. The moment I stepped inside, the building felt lighter, as if the walls themselves knew something irreversible had shifted. By noon, my phone exploded. Calls, texts, emails, then one voicemail after another. But one message stood out. Not by tone, but by fear. "Kate, this is Robert from legal. Please tell me you didn't post the documentation. Call me back immediately." 2 seconds later, another voicemail. Another voice. Mr. Beaumont. His voice wasn't commanding anymore. It trembled. "Kate, we need to talk." And then the most satisfying pause. "Please." That was the moment I knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And the consequences? They were only just starting to unfold. When I arrived at the office the next morning, I didn't expect a spectacle. I expected quiet awkwardness, maybe whispers. But the moment I stepped into the lobby, I realized something else entirely had happened. People were staring. Not subtly, not politely. Wide-eyed, stiff-backed, waiting. The receptionist, who normally smiled at everyone like her life depended on it, looked pale. She cleared her throat. "Kate, the CEO asked me to send you upstairs immediately." No greeting. No small talk. Just urgency. I nodded once and stepped toward the elevators. As the doors closed, my phone buzzed again. 5 messages from people I barely spoke to. 1 from a client, 2 from department heads, 1 from HR, and 1 from Ethan. "Where are you? We need to talk." I didn't respond. The doors opened to the executive floor, a place that usually felt tense from ambition, but today felt suffocating. Whispers stopped the moment I walked through. Someone hissed under their breath. "That's her." Another murmured, "I told him she wouldn't take it." I ignored all of it and made my way down the hallway. Mr. Beaumont was standing outside the conference room, not seated, not relaxed. Standing, pacing, jaw tight. The moment he saw me, his expression morphed into something between relief and anger. "Kate," he said, "we need to speak. Immediately." Behind him, the company lawyer, Robert, held a stack of papers and looked like someone had drained all the blood from his face. And next to him, arms crossed and eyes burning, stood Ethan. He looked different today. There was no smirk, no arrogance, only panic disguised poorly as rage. I walked inside calmly and took a seat. No one else sat. Mr. Beaumont exhaled slowly. "Tell me you didn't send project documentation to clients and board members." "It wasn't to everyone," I replied. "Only to those directly impacted by decisions made without proper approval." Robert shut his eyes briefly like he was silently begging a higher power for patience. Ethan slammed his palm against the table. "You went behind management. You tried to sabotage me." I turned my head and looked at him. Really looked. His anger wasn't leadership. It was fear. "I shared factual project records," I said evenly. "If those documents jeopardize your credibility, that isn't sabotage. It's transparency." Silence. A thick, trembling silence. Robert cleared his throat. "Kate, the board is alarmed. 2 major clients have already requested meetings. 1 forwarded your documentation and asked whether they should begin transitioning their contract." I didn't flinch. I already knew. One of them called me last night. Mr. Beaumont scrubbed a hand across his forehead. "Why would you do this? Why not come to me directly?" I met his eyes, not with anger, but with exhaustion. I did, many times. I let the words settle. Slow, heavy, true. You dismissed every concern as resistance to change. You let Ethan push policies, contracts, and timelines without oversight. My job was to protect the company from preventable mistakes. And instead, I was punished for doing exactly that. His shoulders slumped just slightly. For the first time, he looked less like a CEO, more like a man realizing something he built was cracking. Ethan scoffed. "Dad, she's manipulating this." "No." Mr. Beaumont's voice cut clean through the room. "Enough." Ethan froze. Everyone froze. Mr. Beaumont looked at me again, expression harder now, but not cruel, calculating. "What do you want, Kate?" he asked quietly. It wasn't a question of negotiation. It was a question of admission, that he had lost control, that something irreversible had shifted. I took a breath. "Nothing. I've already resigned." His jaw tightened. "You are critical to ongoing operations." "No," I said softly. I was critical. Past tense. Another silence. Longer. More tense. Robert finally spoke. "Kate, legally speaking, since you resigned before any disciplinary action concluded, your contracts, including your severance clause and vested stock, remain enforceable." Ethan's head snapped toward him. "What stock?" My eyes flicked to him. He truly had no idea. Of how business works. Of how contracts work. Of how much I had built while he played executive. Robert continued carefully. "Kate holds shares tied to departmental growth metrics. Based on current valuation, those holdings are substantial." "How substantial?" Ethan demanded. Robert didn't answer. I did. Enough that ignoring my warnings wasn't just insulting, it was financially irresponsible. Mr. Beaumont inhaled sharply. A man used to control. A man suddenly aware he didn't have it. He swallowed. "Kate, please, come back to my office. Let's renegotiate." I stood, not abruptly, not dramatically. Just done. There was nothing left to renegotiate. I walked toward the door. Before leaving, I paused and spoke. Not to him, not to Ethan, but to the room. To build something lasting, leadership has to be earned, not inherited. Then I walked out. No one followed. No one spoke. No one breathed. I expected silence after leaving the conference room. Instead, the moment I stepped into the hallway, someone moved toward me. It was Maya, one of the analysts from my team. Her eyes were glossy, her voice shaky. "Is it true?" she whispered. "You're really leaving?" I nodded. She swallowed hard, looked away, and then surprised me by pulling me into a hug. Quick, tight, like someone clinging to the last moment before things changed forever. "You were the only manager who ever listened," she murmured. "I'm sorry it ended like this." I rested a hand on her shoulder. "It didn't end," I said quietly. "It just changed direction." She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't convinced. When she returned to her desk, others stood and watched me walk away. Some with respect, some with regret. Others with fear in their eyes because they knew what my departure meant. There was no safety net now. Not for them. Not for the company. Not for the truth. By the time I reached the lobby, word had spread beyond whispers. The air felt electric, like the building itself was aware that something irreversible had happened. The elevator chimed behind me and I heard hurried footsteps. "Kate, wait." It wasn't a voice filled with anger or authority. It was tired. And strangely, human. I turned. Mr. Beaumont approached. No entourage, no lawyer, no Ethan shadowing him. Just a man, older than yesterday, shoulders heavier, eyes uncertain. "Walk with me," he said. A request this time, not a command. We stepped outside. The late morning air carried the smell of rain, cold but cleansing. Traffic hummed, indifferent to the power shift happening on the sidewalk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he exhaled. "When I hired you," he began slowly, "I wasn't looking for someone agreeable. I wanted someone capable of stabilizing growth, someone smart. And yet," I said gently, "when I followed the policies you approved, I was punished for it." His jaw flexed, the reality settling deeper. I trusted Ethan to grow into the role, he said. I thought he would learn from people like you. But he didn't want to learn, I replied. He wanted authority, not responsibility. That landed. Hard. He didn't argue, didn't defend his son, just nodded. There was a long silence before he spoke again. I read your resignation twice last night, he admitted. I kept waiting for anger between the lines. Accusations, bitterness. There was none, I said. Because I don't need revenge. I need distance. His expression twisted, regret sharpening every crease in his face. Kate, I didn't realize how much you were carrying. I know, I replied. That's why I left. Something broke in his expression then. Not pride, not embarrassment. Something deeper. Recognition. For the first time, he wasn't looking at an employee. He was looking at the fallout of his choices. I'm not here to ask you to return again, he said finally. But I do want to understand something. I met his gaze. What? What should I have done differently? It wasn't a trap. It wasn't manipulation. It was genuinely asked. So I answered honestly. You should have held Ethan to the same standards as everyone else. You should have listened when your team warned you something was wrong, and you should have recognized that loyalty doesn't mean silence. He closed his eyes for a moment, like absorbing truth felt physically painful. When he spoke again, his voice was low. I failed you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was simply true. I nodded once. Maybe. But you don't have to repeat the failure. He looked up, surprised. Fix what can still be fixed, I continued. Not for me. Not for Ethan. For the people still inside that building doing their best with no protection. We stood in silence after that, two people acknowledging a line that could never be uncrossed. Eventually, he extended his hand. Thank you, Kate. Not for leaving, but for finally forcing him to look at what he avoided. I shook his hand. Then I walked away. Not fast, not triumphant. Just forward. Halfway home, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to answer. Hello? A woman's voice responded, calm and professional. Hello, Kate. My name is Olivia Martinez. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Evercrest Dynamics. We received your documentation this morning, not through the company, but through a mutual contact. I straightened, pulse steady. Not anxious, just alert. We'd like to speak with you, she continued, about a position, or possibly a partnership. A beat of silence. Then, are you available this afternoon? For the first time since the suspension, I smiled. Yes, I said. I think I am. Because sometimes leaving isn't the end. It's the doorway someone else has been waiting to open. I spent the drive home rehearsing possibilities, not because I needed the perfect response for Olivia, but because everything felt surreal. Just 24 hours earlier, I'd been suspended, humiliated, dismissed as difficult. Now a major company wanted a conversation. When I arrived home, I didn't sit down. I paced, slow steps across my living room, letting the reality settle instead of rushing to react. At 2 p.m., I joined the call. The screen lit up with Olivia's face first. Sharp eyes, calm posture, the kind of presence that didn't need to demand respect. Seconds later, 2 more faces joined. A CFO named Marcus and their CEO, a woman named Eleanor Clark. No boardroom theatrics, no forced smiles. Just 3 people who looked like they understood competence. Eleanor spoke first. Kate, we'll be direct. We've seen the results of your work. We've reviewed your documentation, your compliance structure, and your implementation framework. It's rare we see someone combine technical expertise with leadership clarity. I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard. Ethan once told me I was too assertive to be likable. These people were calling that a strength. Marcus leaned closer to his camera. We've been watching Beaumont Industries for months, he said. Their instability is becoming public. Your departure may accelerate that. His tone wasn't accusatory, just factual. Olivia continued. We're expanding and need someone who understands systems, accountability, and growth at scale. We're offering a role that aligns with how you operate. Chief Strategy Officer. I let the title sit in the space between us. Not a supervisor. Not a department lead. Executive. A position Ethan didn't even know how to spell. Eleanor spoke again, softer this time. You were punished for protecting a company that didn't protect you. We'd rather hire someone who understands the weight of responsibility than someone who wants authority for show. I drew a slow breath. Not because I was unsure, but because I finally felt seen. What would the timeline be? I asked. Eleanor smiled. We were hoping you'd ask. We'd like you to start in 3 weeks, if you're interested. My answer was immediate. I am. Her smile widened, not triumphant, just satisfied. We'll send a draft contract this evening. After the call ended, I sat in silence. Not numb, not overwhelmed, just steady. For the first time in years, my future wasn't tied to someone else's blindness. It was mine. That evening, as promised, the contract arrived. It wasn't a negotiation disguised as an offer. It was respectful, fair, and generous. I forwarded it to a lawyer I trusted, not the one Beaumont used, and closed my laptop. Just as I reached for a cup of tea, my phone lit up again. This time it was James. I hesitated before answering, but I did. His voice was low and strained. Kate, do you have a minute? Yes. There was a pause. One long exhale. It's chaos here, he said quietly. 2 board members resigned this afternoon. A client froze payments. HR is scrambling, and Ethan... He stopped, as if searching for a polite version. I supplied one. Is panicking? A humorless breath escaped him. That's the gentle version. I leaned against the counter. How are you holding up? The silence spoke louder than his answer. I'm doing my job, he said finally. But it's hard watching everything fall apart when it didn't have to. There it was, the truth underneath all of this. It never had to end this way. But ego destroys what humility could save. You'll be okay, I told him. You know the work. People trust you. Only because you showed them how to. His words lingered, unexpected, sincere. James, I said softly, you don't need me to make decisions. You've always been capable. He didn't argue, didn't deflect. He just whispered, thank you. Before hanging up, he added something else, quiet but heavy. They're asking if you'll come back as a consultant. I told them not to call you unless they plan to listen this time. I smiled, not out of spite, but closure. Tell them no. Already did. That small detail mattered more than he knew. Someone finally drew a boundary. Not because I demanded it, but because they understood why it mattered. Later that night, my lawyer called. I reviewed the contract, she said. This is an opportunity most people wait a decade for. They respect you. Accept it. I will. And one more thing, she added, her voice shifting warmer. You didn't just walk away from a company. You walked away from a pattern. That takes courage. After the call ended, I stood by the window, watching city lights flicker against the glass. I'd always been afraid that leaving meant losing everything I'd worked for. I never expected leaving to be the thing that opened every door I'd been shut out of. And somewhere deep inside, a certainty settled. This was not the climax. This was the turning point. The part of the story where the person who was pushed aside finally takes their rightful place, not out of revenge, but out of undeniable worth. And the people who underestimated me? They hadn't seen the last consequence yet. Not even close. 3 months later, my life barely resembled the one I'd walked away from. My days were full. Strategy meetings, development planning, Leadership discussions, not chaos, not politics. People asked questions because they wanted clarity, not ammunition. Respect wasn't demanded, it was embedded in the culture. At Evercrest, I wasn't tolerated. I was valued. Some mornings I still woke up expecting a crisis notification, a last-minute scramble, or an angry voicemail from someone who mistook entitlement for authority. But instead, I woke to quiet, to stability, to purpose. The kind that didn't require proving my worth every single day just to survive. It was a Friday afternoon when the past resurfaced. I was finishing a final review of a quarterly report when my assistant knocked gently. "Kate, there's someone asking to see you. He says it's urgent." I looked up, expecting a vendor or partner, but when I stepped into the lobby, I froze. Mr. Beaumont. His suit looked worn, his posture tired. He held a folder in one hand and in the other, something I never expected to see. Humility. He stood when he saw me. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," he said. I didn't agree. I clarified gently. "I agreed to hear why you're here." He nodded, accepting the correction. We walked to a small meeting room. Neutral space, no power dynamic. When the door closed, he didn't start with excuses. He didn't start with business. He started with the truth. The company is failing. There was no bitterness in his tone, just quiet resignation. We lost 3 major accounts. Investors are nervous. The board is restructuring. Ethan, he paused, struggling for the right words. Ethan has stepped down. He's getting help. I let the information sit in the space between us, not to gloat, but to understand. "And where does that leave you?" I asked. He exhaled. "With regret," he said, "and hope something can still be salvaged." He took a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Inside were revised governance documents, leadership changes, accountability measures. It was everything I once asked for. Policies that would have prevented everything that happened. Policies now written only after the damage was undeniable. "You're rebuilding," I said. "Yes," he replied. "But we need help. Direction, structure." Then, slowly, carefully, "We need you." The words weren't flattering. They were heavy, costly, earned. I studied him. Not the CEO I once feared, but a man who had finally faced consequences instead of hiding behind authority. "What exactly are you asking?" I asked finally. His voice softened, almost breaking. A chance. Not to erase the past, but to do better moving forward. A long moment passed. I thought about the years I spent shrinking myself to avoid conflict. The nights I stayed late fixing mistakes to protect a company that refused to protect me. The version of myself who believed loyalty required self-abandonment. And then I thought about now. A team who trusted me. A workplace that respected me. A future that wasn't built on apology. I folded my hands. "I'm willing to help," I said slowly, "but not the way you once expected." He lifted his eyes. "You won't return." "No." The finality wasn't cruel. It was honest. I will not step back into a role where I had to justify my worth. But I'll agree to consult. Temporarily, with defined boundaries, written authority, and full independence. If you want guidance, I'll give it. But I won't be the person carrying the entire company on my back again. He swallowed. Relief and resignation mixed together. "That's more than fair." He stood, then paused. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. I never apologized. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because apologies aren't owed in rush. He continued anyway. "I should have protected you. I should have listened. And I should have recognized your value before it cost everyone this much." His voice tightened. "I'm sorry, Kate." For the first time since the day I walked out, the tension inside me loosened. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just release. "Thank you," I said. Sometimes closure isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's a soft truth placed gently where a wound used to be. He left the building with a different posture than he arrived. Not defeated, but aware. I watched him go, then returned to my office. My office earned, not inherited. As I sat at my desk, the thought settled fully. Leaving wasn't losing. Leaving was choosing. Choosing myself. Choosing dignity. Choosing a life where my worth wasn't conditional. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't ruining someone. It's becoming someone they can never diminish again. And I did. Not to prove anything, but because I finally learned something it took years to understand. You do not owe an apology for refusing to be underestimated. Not then. Not now. Not ever.